My name is Igor, and today we are meeting with Patrick to talk about the life in Russia and how the expats feel here in Moscow, how the life for foreigners here. So my first questions to you, Patrick, is how you doing? How you come here in Moscow?
How did I come here to Moscow? Well, prior to coming to Moscow, I was 4 years in Georgia. That is Georgia in the Caucasus.
Okay.
And I went to Georgia to teach English.
Okay.
And I enjoyed my experience in Georgia and made a lot of friends. But I always knew I wanted to come to Russia. You know, it was always kind of a dream of mine. And I applied for a job here at a school. And they hired me and arranged for me to get a visa, so I came here. This is about 1 year and 4 months ago. So it was late 2016, like October or something like this.
So you have a lot of time to see around and visit some interesting places in Moscow. Could you say what is you like here more? What's the place you like? What's the events you like? Maybe give some advices for newcomers.
Well, I don't have any one outstanding favorite thing or place in Moscow. It's really the total experience is fascinating for me. What impresses me about Moscow is its scale. It's not so much vertical scale like in New York City, where I had lived for many years, but more like lateral scale. It's like a huge city, yes. And I'm fascinated with your very somber, large monuments. You have an interesting variety of parks here. A very eclectic but grand architecture here. And so yeah, everything taken together is for me it's very compelling.
Compare with New York, what you can say about the infrastructure? How easy to get from one point to another from here in Moscow using the metro or some public bus, and in New York as a sample?
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, both cities are huge metropolitan, cities. They're both highly organized. I would say, and the infrastructure in both cities are quite good. However, I think the infrastructure in America in general and in New York in particular is declining, and Moscow certainly is a cleaner city than New York City.
I heard from some other Russians who were in Europe and in some other foreign countries. They say the communal workers here in Russia are doing their job much better than in New York.
And it's a safer city by far.
You mean a criminal situation?
Yeah, it's much safer here to live, and you can go any place in Moscow pretty much and feel pretty safe. In fact, the same I could say about Tbilisi, Georgia. But in New York, no, there were some parts of New York you'd have to be very careful about going to at the wrong hour. So.
I have a good question for you in this point. Okay, like a sample. Do you know how to call to police in the case if some trouble you got here in Moscow? What are you gonna do? What is your script?
Good question. Maybe I just jump up and down. I don't know. Never thought about it, Igor, to be honest.
So for a whole this 1 year and 4 months, you ever didn't have any situation when you supposed to think this is a moment when I need to call the police. This is a moment when I need some support from a police or some authorities.
A good question. I guess I was maybe a little complacent. I felt the place to be so safe that I didn't really think about the eventuality where something dramatic and would happen. Like a dangerous situation. It just never occurred to me, and it should have. Yeah.
I suppose everyone have to know some phone calls, phone numbers where they can call
Yeah,
in
yeah.
some trouble cases, just in case if it's even if it's happened not with you. I hope so. But in case if it will be somebody need your help and you need to call immediately to police you.
Okay.
Maybe you didn't know that, but I just not long ago I didn't use it. In Russia, in central Moscow, there exists a tourist police department, and about 200 policemen. They speak in English. They regularly are working in central and the most famous parts of Russia. They can speak English, and in the case if the foreigners need some help or they got some trouble with the locals or criminals, they can go to them and they will advise them or solve the problem. So yeah, just notice.
Okay, that's good advice. I will look into that because yeah, I to be honest, I never really considered that. So I will do that now.
Okay, let's go to the next. So, how easy here in Moscow, like example, find some property for rental? What was your experience? Can you tell me?
Well, when I came to Moscow first, I stayed with a hostel, very small but very good hostel called Souvenir.
It's not advertisement.
Oh, that's an advertisement. No, no, I'm joking, of course. And you know, I ended up staying there for up to 10 months.
10 months is long.
Yeah, it's a long time. Yes, I was looking for apartments in that time, but rather lazily, I have to say, and rather casually, maybe too casually, which is why I was at a hostel for 10 months.
There was a lot of people staying in hostel. How many beds are staying there? How many people stay in a room? Can you share with us? Just should know.
Yeah, as I say, it was a small hostel. The largest room had 8 beds, and there were, you know, the other rooms were just double beds in small rooms, you know. So it was a small place, but there was a sense of family there. It was very clean. It was well kept. The staff were professional, and so I enjoyed my time there. There were a lot of transient guests, as you would expect with a hostel. They came and went, mostly Russian. But there were a core of guests who were more or less on a permanent basis there. So we developed a kind of a family there of sorts, between maybe 4 or 5 guests, like permanent guests. So it was an interesting experience, I must say, and an enjoyable one, yeah, I must say.
An interesting situation was how did you communicate with the Russians there? Because you are the foreigner, you don't know the Russian language at all, and they are the Russians. Most of the Russians didn't speak English. How did you solve some problems? Because I'm sure there was some, maybe not trouble, but just some situation where you need to communicate with other people who live in a hostel and the service persons. How it was there?
Well, the son of the owner, Grigory, he knew some English. His parents did not, but he did. So we were able to communicate basically. And of course, this core group that were there more or less on a permanent basis knew some English too. There was one guy, for example, he was an entrepreneur businessman, and he was fluent in English. So I got along with Misha.
So it was my stereotype that the Russian didn't speak English at all.
Well, most don't, Igor, to be honest. But the younger generation are becoming much more familiar and comfortable with speaking English. And so with the younger generation, yeah, it's likely they know some English. Yeah, so that's good for me.
It's nice to hear it about the young generation, because sometimes from TV I can see some TV shows that the people are blame a new generation and say that the young people are very stupid, they don't want to study, they're going on the streets instead of going to the school. The school programs are going to more simplified, and it's now we cannot expect from a young generation the same quality of prepared for adult life as was in previous generation? What do you say as a teacher? What is your opinion?
Well, I can't disagree with that because really I don't have enough of information or experience here. So there may be truth to that, actually. In fact, I'm finding this trend in the West a lot, just how you described there. So I'm very concerned with the dropping of standards among the youth, educationally, and even just cultural habits. There is a lot of, I don't know, inattentiveness to some basic manners, for example. But also ignorance level, especially in the West, I'm finding is really increasing among the youth.
Do you have some samples of this? Because when you tell me some just simple samples, I couldn't really agree or disagree with you, because I know the situation here in Russia as it is, and sometimes I'm agree that school programs again going more simplified, but sometimes as for me, I suppose it is more high requirements from real life to the new generation. It's actually a more high level of challenge to them, and they need to answer for many questions, not only in school but also on the street, on a job. And maybe I'm wrong, but sometimes the new generation are a little bit harder than it was previous one. I mean, the harder in the level of searching something new, in the level of the they need to be prepared for much more situations than what parents was.
Yeah, I think generally speaking, the availability of work when they come out of college or school is a lot less than it used to be, maybe. So yeah, that's a reality. For example, in the West, in America in particular, more and more young people are staying longer with their parents. So you have people now in their late 20s, early 30s, even late 30s, still staying with their parents. That's on the rise in America dramatically. So
what was the reason? Why is this?
It's just economics.
It's all because the families are not available to buy a new flat, new house.
Yeah, it's just all economics. Yeah, it's just lack of money. They can't afford to set out on their own.
Let's back to the Moscow again.
Yeah, sure.
I am sure we will have a chance to talk about the foreign life in New York and in other countries for you, but right now we just need to talk about the Moscow and some things what's going on here. The question is I want to ask you is what about the work permit and visa here? Can you tell us some advices for newcomers as a sample? If somebody wants to come into Moscow or stay here for not only for 3 months, 6 months, how you can describe your experience in live here in Moscow? How you can say what is the easiest way to get the visa to Russia?
Well, just get work in advance. Get somebody to sponsor you, to arrange to get a visa for you, a work visa. And depending on the visa, you must leave every 3 or 6 months. Even you can even get I think visas for a year where you have to leave Russia and then return in order to keep your visa active. So I would say just get a contract in advance with some firm here, and they will sponsor you. They will usually work with a consultant who arranges to get you a visa, and as I say, that visa can be 3, 6 months, a year.
Okay, so you don't see any problems here for you or for other foreigners if they want to get a visa for work or just a tourist visa? Have you met with some casualties or maybe problems in this area?
Not personally, but I hear of them, of some difficulties. But I think primarily the difficulties is the requirement to leave the country after 3, 6 months, a year in order to renew your visa. So you cross the border and then return and you get a stamp and you can renew your visa. That's the only difficulty really. But personally speaking, I think immigration should be tightly controlled. I think Russians, have the right to decide who comes to Russia, and there should be strict rules about immigration, frankly. And I'm okay with those strict rules. That's fine.
I have a question about the stereotypes about Russia and Russians, especially in the foreign countries. Can you tell us what is the image of the Russians right now on maybe newspapers or TV? How they are trying to promote Russia, and maybe what was your first impression when you came here and realized that the stereotypes actually a little bit wrong or they're a little bit different?
Yeah, I mean, the West has a very kind of complicated relationship with Russia down in history, down through the centuries. Kind of a love-hate relationship, and usually the hate or the love rises or falls depending on the political requirements of the ages of the age we're talking about. So there are positive stereotypes and there are negative stereotypes. Right now, the negative stereotypes are more exposed in the West, okay, because of political reasons. But for me, I mean, stereotypes are for, well, I mean, they're not really for intelligent people. Intelligent people understand complexities of a group of people, culture and society, etc. And I don't mind stereotypes if they're seen with a kind of a sense of humor, if they're used with a kind of sense of humor, that's okay. But stereotypes can be used very maliciously as well. But in any case, for me, I was always fascinated with Russia. For me, it was deep and darkly exotic and mysterious. And I was always fascinated by Russia and its mysteries. And I knew one day I would come here. So here I am, yeah. I'm very happy to be here, yeah.
Are you happy to see what you got here as experience and as a lifestyle here in Moscow?
Yeah, I mean, Moscow now has reached, the development standards of the West. In some ways, it has surpassed it. So, I'm very comfortable. As a Westerner, I'm very comfortable with the standard of living and just the attitude of people here in general. So I'm getting no static from any quarter really, and Russians have made me feel very quite at home here, and it's been a great experience so far. So it's good to be here.
That's cool. Another question is, how about the foreign community here? Is a large community of foreigners who are staying here in Moscow? You have a friend with people from a foreign community or Russian community in Moscow? How can you describe it?
Yeah, I have a mix of friends, some Russian, some expats. Yeah, I mean, inevitably you're going to run into expats, and it's useful because we share a lot of information and survival tips and things like that.
You can share with us some survival tips.
I don't have any catalog in my mind right now, but
maybe top of them.
But just practical details about transport passes and how to deal with low-level bureaucracies, post office, whatever. But no, I've even before I came to Russia, I've struck up friendships with 2 Russians particularly. And when I came to Russia, they've been extremely helpful for me. And even to now, they're doing everything. I mean, if I get into kind of complicated situations where I need a translator, there are some areas of bureaucracy where I need a translator with me. They will volunteer their time and do that for me. So it's been very useful, and they've been great for me. And I'm sure a lot of expats have those kind of Russian friends who are willing to help them And yeah, the Russians I find are very generous with their time and their energy to help foreigners feel comfortable here. So, you know, I've had good experience.
You say that you got your two Russian friends before coming to Moscow.
Yeah,
How
that's
you
right.
got the connections to them?
Well, one was direct and personal. I met the gentleman in Tbilisi because he was doing some business in Tbilisi. And in fact, my very first experience in Moscow, he was, it was an interesting one. But before I get to that story, let me tell you about the other connection. I met another lady online through Facebook, and we got into a conversation. And yeah, we built up a kind of an online friendship through Facebook. And then I just told her, oh, by the way, I'm coming to Moscow next month. And, you know, she was shocked.
She's a single or she has a family?
Well, she has a family, but no, she's single. She's not married or with children. But she's very much attached to her family here. But she's been very helpful to me when I arrived here, and is my friend to this day. So, but yeah, let me tell you about my very first experience in Moscow. It was kind of interesting. There's an expression that you Russians have, so I'm told, is that I was taken from the plane to the party.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's an expression you guys use or.
We have it.
Yeah, okay.
I understand what you're talking about.
But in this case, a little variation on that. I was taken from the plane to an Orthodox church, and I directly. I mean, when I got off the train coming from the airport, he took me to Strutensky Monastery. You know, they have a church there.
What is this monastery?
I think it's called Strutinsky Monastery.
I'm not an expert in church, so
well,
I couldn't be sure.
I mean, my friend is a very religious guy. And yeah, that made a great impression on me. Besides, he told me that if you really want to understand Russia properly, you really have to you know, experience the Russian Orthodox Church and get into the heart, because that's really the heart of Russia. And he took me straight from the train right to the to the service, and I was just there, and for the first time in a Russian Orthodox church, I was there for 1.5 hours, standing in one spot and just doing this. You know, it was a fantastic experience. I mean, it was very unusual, and I'll never forget it. I'll never forget it.
Did they sing the songs, or what was it?
Oh yeah, there was a choir above as well, and a lot of you know, very serious churchgoers, and it was a very solemn affair. And but I was very impressed with it. You know, it's just an unusual experience, coming straight from Georgia, plane, train, and then taken straight into the middle of this church, a very old church here in Moscow, and having this intense experience for the first time. It was, I'll never forget that.
Did you get back there to the church?
Yeah, I have been back there a few times with my friend, yes. And in fact, at one point, I was going to be a guide for some foreign tourists who visited the monastery. I have been in Moscow this whole time. I have never ventured outside of Moscow, except for 2 occasions. And both occasions involved, you know, teaching camp, teaching youngsters English at a camp.
Mm-hmm.
One was in some satellite city outside of Moscow. I forget the name of the little mini city, satellite city outside of Moscow. So I was there for you know, 10 days teaching kids.
How's the difference between Moscow and other provincial cities?
Well, I actually, my experience was limited just to the camp itself. So I didn't get an opportunity to go around into the center of the city and experience the old city. So
maybe you are interested to go in some places. What is your really passion about Russia? What do you want to know? What is your it's a whole universe here. Russia is a whole universe compared with Europe, compared with other countries, Western, because of course any even small country like Thailand or Ireland, they have their own universe. But if you talk about Russia, it's just inclusion in many times. So maybe you can give me some idea what is interesting to you.
Oh, well, I mean, I'll take every opportunity to travel in Russia. The only limitation is dingy, you know.
The money, it's all about the money.
It's all about the money, right? So yeah, I mean, if I had the time and money, I would travel all over Russia, you know. So far, I have been to Crimea twice, actually.
You was in Crimea, how are you?
Yeah, Crimea. Once, as I said, to go to this children's camp in Yevpatoria on the west side of Crimea. And another occasion when I visited my friend who met me at the airport and took me to the church. He has a summer house in Crimea, and I spent over a week there. Surfing and swimming. Oh, it was great.
How's it there?
Oh,
compare with Europe. Is it Europe or not? Because there's a lot of discussion. Is Russia is Europe or not?
Well, yeah, that's an interesting discussion. Is Russia Europe or not? In one respect, it definitely is, because it has. You cannot think about the culture and civilization of Europe without including Russia. It's impossible. If you look at all the great authors, musicians, thinkers, you cannot exclude them from European history. It's impossible.
Yeah, we can say the same about the India and China. They also very did a lot in the past for culture of whole Europe, and when the Silk Way, it was a trade way from a Middle Age.
No, but I'm really talking about a direct connection. Much more direct historically down through the centuries,
okay,
and a continuous one.
Okay.
No, I mean you cannot speak about European civilization without speaking
because
about
some stereotypes told us that the Russians actually they're not Europeans, they're like Asians.
Well, this is interesting because yes, Russia is a bit of an enigma vis-a-vis Europe. It's both European but not European. So they're in a very interesting position. They can choose to be both. In fact, this would be my preference if they claim their identity as both Eastern and Western. They're in a very unique position vis-a-vis Europe. And I would say, yes, preserve your own unique identity. There is no need to be wholly Western, and there's no need to be wholly Eastern. You're your own universe, and my exhortation will be to be content with yourselves as identity or civilization. So, let's see. Yeah, I mean, this is an ongoing debate. There's a lot of Atlanticists who are very focused westward. Their sights are focused westwards, and they want Russia to become fully and wholly Western. And then there are others who resist that move towards the West. So it's a constant tension and a battle there. I mean, this is why I find philosophers like Alexander Dugin rather interesting. Is because he's wrestling with this.
Have you read Alexander Dugin states or books?
No, but I've listened to a lot of his videos and his interviews, and I find his propositions fascinating, and his way of thinking about very fundamental identity of nations and civilizations. He's very fascinating to listen to. And
do you know some other Russian philosopher in modern time? What you can share with us?
No, I can't, to be honest.
I will give you some.
Okay, I'm looking forward to it. Okay. I mean, this is what I'm looking forward to, actually, is just learning more about Russia, Russian culture, Russian history, Russian attitudes. I mean, there's a diversity of opinion on almost everything here in Russia, and that's great. There should be. In fact, there is more of that here now in Russia, in modern Russia, than there is in the United States. The United States is becoming more conformist every day, and it seems like the poles are reversing in terms of values between Russia and the United States. It's fascinating. We're living in fascinating times, truly.
Patrick, I don't want to interrupt you, but
Yeah.
we have just several minutes left. So the last question is to you. What you can make as advice to the foreigners? Let's back to the past a little bit. If somebody wants to come to the Russia, what you can advise them? What they have to know about the Russia? What can help them? A summarizing of our previous conversation.
You know, I would just, well, you know, people have different motivations coming to Russia, you know. So I really have to learn what the motivations are to begin with before I can give them kind of some advice. But you mean generally, I would just say, just get a warm coat and some gloves and a hat, and that's about it. No, I mean, look, it's a great country. Come on here, especially you tourists. A great country, fascinating history. You will enjoy it here. If you're coming to work, yeah, you know, it's best to organize everything before you come, rather than just come without work. And so I would say prepare in advance as much as you can. It will help you. But nevertheless, come anyway. You know. I'm not sure I have any specific advice I can give you that would be any different if you were
Maybe some general advices. It's okay. Look, Patrick, I'm very glad to see you today here in this place. It was an interesting conversation for me, and I hope for our people who will be see this video too.
Sure.
See you next time, and good luck.
Okay, thank you, Igor. I enjoyed the
Subscribe to the channel, set the likes, and see you later. Bye bye.
Yeah,